Joe Smith here. So, Joe Biden is publicly addressing Congress for the first time since taking office. As you can see, we got Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi behind him. That way they can pull on the strings that move his head and allow his lips to move up and down. And Nancy's not very good ventriloquist, so she's got a mask over her face so that way you don't see her lips moving when Biden's talking. But otherwise, they're pretty good puppeteers. It looks pretty realistic here so far. But right now, Biden's talking about guns or gun violence here. Let's see what he has to say. Might stop and pause it here for a minute in between to kind of address some of the comments.
Violence has become an epidemic in America. The flag at the White House was still flying at half-mast for the 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia, when 10 more lives were taken in the mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those two events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat the NRA. Mass shootings and gun violence declined. Check out the report over 10 years. But in the early 2000s, the law expired. We've seen daily bloodshed since. I'm not saying if the law continued, we wouldn't see bloodshed.
Okay, yeah, it was under Bill Clinton that this gun ban was issued, signed into law. And yeah, it did in the early 2000s expire. Didn't have to expire. In fact, the president at the time had the option to extend it and continue it longer, but the president and vice president at the time agreed and concluded that it did not need to be extended because it had little to no effect on crime, because criminals weren't using those types of guns to begin with. And who was the president at the time that chose not to extend it? Well, that was Barack Obama. And who was Barack Obama's vice president at the time that chose not to extend this gun law? Well, that was who was that guy? Oh yeah, that was Joe Biden. That was this very same Joe Biden here. So this very same Joe Biden and Barack Obama chose not to extend the Clinton gun ban. They chose to allow it to expire and to go back to how life was before it. As Joe Biden said, or Barack Obama and Joe Biden concluded that the guns that were banned, or magazines that were banned and stuff, isn't what the criminals were using in the first place. So we didn't really need that gun ban law. So doing a little flip-flopping here, Joey. Excuse me. Let's see, what else does he have to say?
2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden, surrounded by some of the bravest people I know, the survivors and families who lost loved ones to gun violence, I laid out several of the Department of Justice actions that are being taken to impact on this epidemic. One of them is banning so-called ghost guns. These are homemade guns built from a kit that includes directions how to finish the firearm. The parts have no serial numbers, so they show up at crime scenes and they can't be traced.
Okay, well, here's some things about that. These so-called ghost guns, actually, no, they do not come with instructions on how to finish them. At least none of the ones that Joe Smith has ever got. And you know what else they don't come with? They don't come with the tools machining tools and stuff that you need to finish them either. And yes, he is correct about none of the parts have serial numbers, but you know, on regular AR-15s, none of the parts have serial numbers either, except for one. And you know, these guns, pretty sure they're not finding $1,000 AR-15s left laying at crime scenes with no serial numbers on that they can't trace back. Pretty sure if there's no serial number on it, they're not ditching it or whatever. But you know, the guns that they do find at crime scenes with serial numbers on them, they can't always trace those either. All they can do is, because there's no national registry, all they can do is basically trace it back to where it was sold. And then the store probably has record of who they sold it to. Oh, that person could have sold it to a friend that sold it to someone that sold it to someone that sold it to someone. It could have been stolen. So you're not finding AR-15s with no serial numbers that you can't at crime scenes, first of all. Other than a couple of shooters where the shooter was attached to the AR-15 still when you found the AR-15. But guns with serial numbers, you can't even always, sometimes or whatever, trace back to who used them to commit the crime, other than who they were originally sold to. And that's assuming they weren't stolen from the gun shop, because there's been gun shops that were robbed. There's been a couple pawn shops or gun shops here locally that got robbed. One was next door to the police station. In fact, literally next door. And the other half of the building, and it got robbed. So there's a little comment about police. When gun shops getting robbed and the police are in the next room over on the other side of the wall, they can't respond in time. The robber got away.
The buyers of these ghost gun kits aren't required to pass any background check. Anyone, from a criminal or terrorist, could buy this kit and within 30 minutes have a weapon that's lethal.
No, in about an hour, assuming you already have the tools and know what you're doing. 30 minutes maybe if you've put together a lot or machined a lot and got really good and fast at it, but it takes Joe Smith about an hour. But you know what? Yeah, criminals could buy those kits, but criminals can also buy guns from smugglers coming across the open border from Mexico into Texas or Arizona, New Mexico. In fact, that's where most criminals get their guns, through your open border, Joey.
But no more. And I'll do everything in my power to protect the American people from this epidemic of gun violence, but it's time for Congress to act as well. Look, I don't want to become confrontational, but we need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And don't tell me it can't be done. We did it before and it worked. Talk to most responsible gun owners and hunters. They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds in a weapon. What do you Kevlar vests? They'll tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun but shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds.
It's like, well, hunters don't need guns that have 100-round magazines. Well, you're right, hunters don't. But the rest of us do when we go to the grocery store. So what do you say about that, Joey?
Reasonable reforms have overwhelming support from the American people, including many gun owners. The country supports reform and Congress should act. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. From the very beginning, there were certain guns, weapons, that could not be owned by Americans. Certain people could not own those weapons ever. We're not changing the Constitution. We're being reasonable. I think.
Yeah, there are certain guns that you cannot own. Back in the beginning, that's what the NFA bill, what was 1934 or something, somewhere around there. And guess what? You still can't own those guns. Well, very few people can, if they actually file for Class 3 permit. If they're in a state that allows that, and then they pass a background check and with a 9-month to year processing time or wait or whatever, and this and that, and the fees, and chief of police or local sheriff notified, and all that. So, but there's still some other weapons out there that even still can't possess even under that. So it's not like these guns that were banned became unbanned. They're still kind of banned. And yeah, there's even more, like, for example, Glock automatic pistols. There's like the first model or a couple models of Glock pistols that are full auto in Europe or rest of the world, but you cannot own them in America. You cannot import the parts, even with like a Class 3 tax stamp or whatever. You still cannot import those parts, so there's still guns that you cannot own in America. So it's like, no, we never unbanned those guns. They're still banned.
This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I think it's an American issue. And here's what else we can do. Immigration has always been essential to America. Let's end our exhausting war over immigration. For more than 30 years,
Going to wrap up the video here. That's probably enough. He's moving on to a different topic here, but yeah, it's kind of Joe Smith's thoughts on the topics that he covered here. And, you know, he's saying that we have a gun problem in America. Well, Joey, maybe you should take a look at who the majority of the shooters are and what they have in common. It's been Joe Smith signing out.